Hi, welcome to Blogging Heads TV. This is Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade. My guest today, once again, is Bill Black. Bill, thanks for coming back on. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, Bill Black. I'm a historian, a teacher in Houston, Texas. I'm also an editor at Contingent magazine, a nonprofit history magazine that publishes stories by historians of various flavors outside the tenure-track professoriate, I guess myself included. So, and I also am a freelance writer, and yeah, that's me, Bill.
So thanks for coming back on, Bill. And so we are taping this late Friday evening, January 8th, 2021. And I guess towards the end of one of the strangest, wildest, stupidest weeks in American political history. You're the historian, so I'll let you decide whether that's accurate or not. And I guess I reached out to you earlier today to see if you wanted, because I had some thoughts about the riot, protest, insurrection coup that happened. And a couple hours after that, Donald J. Trump, our president, was permanently suspended or banned or whatever by Twitter, and that
Yes.
is playing out as we speak. Apparently, he's jumping from account to account, and those accounts are being banned like a whack-a-mole. So things are in process, and who knows what the hell is happening? Articles of impeachment are being drawn up, but we will do as we'll talk about what we think is happening as of this moment. Okay, so what were your initial reactions to the events that happened in our nation's capital on Wednesday?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was so absurd and bizarre that my reaction was not one that I think a lot of people had, and understandably, of like fear or, anger or sadness. I was just so mystified by it that it was almost more not reveling, but just sort of sitting in the absurdity of it. And that was really almost a sort of emotionally stunted reaction. I teach at a high school in Houston, and so then that was Wednesday. So it was Thursday. Yesterday I have a government and economics class, or civics class, whatever you want to call it. And so just the whole hour was dedicated toward just talking about it. And I was surprised, I suppose, or even a bit proud of how emotional and passionate the students were about it. And people, students who were even fairly conservative, who were, outraged by it, the sort of violation of the sanctity of the Senate chamber, which is an interesting way of thinking about it. But so yeah, just a lot of raw feelings from it. But I found, it was hard for me to have any reaction to it, or other than just sitting in the absurdity of it and wondering, in a week, is this going to feel like as big an event as it does right now? And I'm already not sure, because I felt that way. How many days ago was it? 4 days ago that the tape was released in which Trump is talking to Georgia's Secretary of State, telling him to find more votes. And I thought that was going to be what we were going to spend a week, despairing over. So it's hard to know, anyway. So,
yeah, I mean, the Trump era has been characterized by a crazy thing happening, everyone freaking out for 12 to 36 hours, and then another crazy thing happens, and you forget about the previous crazy thing, and it's hard to decide whether you overreacted or underreacted or what to the previous crazy thing, because there's no time to reflect because something else crazy is happening. So yeah, I mean, the Georgia thing seems like in the distant, the Georgia, the call seems like in the distance past. I mean, when, this is, so people were talking about impeachment just based on that, and now this is an afterthought. Yeah, it's interesting thinking about your students reacting to it. It made me think of, I was in an AP government politics class in 2000 when the contested election happened then, and I remember that we came in. Oh no, it must have been a U.S. history class because I was a senior, AP U.S. history. We all came in the next day, and we had this great teacher who we all loved, and all the students were ready to talk about the crazy shit that just happened on the day after the election. And he was like, "We're not talking about it. We have to do whatever the assigned thing was." He's like, "We're not talking about it at all. Like, we have to do this. You have the AP exam in 5 months." And yeah, so and this is the sort of combination of like the seriousness of this and the absurdity of it is also reminiscent, although this is like 10,000 times as absurd as at least that initial part was in the 2000 election. So let me think where I want to go with this. I mean, how are we gonna look at this in a couple weeks or in a couple years? I mean, I think there are iconic images from this that we're going to remember. Certainly the guy, was it Prophet Q or something? Shaman Q, the guy who's wearing the horns and the animal skins, and he's standing where like the president of the Senate would stand or whatever, and in an empty chamber. I mean, this is iconic, and it's going to be like remembered forever. And as of right now, 5 people died at this event. One was the woman who was shot by a plainclothes officer, and one was a cop, and 3 other people seem to have had heart attacks or something. There's this rumor that someone tased himself and died that way. Certainly seems possible based on sort of the general ability of these people and what they were doing. So yeah, it's just very, very strange. It's very, very stupid. It's surreal, and I'm in some way I'm like I have 1,000 thoughts, but I'm also totally at a loss. So that's why I wanted to talk about it with someone on the show. So one of the debates has been, what was this? Was this a riot, a protest, a coup, an insurrection? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, because that has been a debate bubbling, at least in historian Twitter. Honestly, the antecedent to that debate is a one that was starting to happen about a month or so ago over whether or not Trump is a fascist, whether calling him a fascist is, like there is a tradition of invoking the fear of fascism as a way of justifying the kind of vast national security state, whether it's Islamofascism, for instance. And I have never been someone who has it in me to get super invested in debates where the surface of the debate is, is it X or is it Y? Right. When really the debate is, how should we define X, right? So if we want to actually debate what is a coup or what is insurrection, that's one thing. But instead you have someone with one definition, someone with another, and then they're just arguing over each other's heads. Yeah. I mean, I think insurrection, an attempted insurrection, is a good way to put it. I do feel there is a little pedant in me that is like, well, it's not really a coup because coup really, you're thinking of the military getting involved, and this was more a mob that...
mob is the term that the newspapers settled on. Yeah. The next day, I think Trump incites mob was the New York Times headline, and the Washington Post had mob also. Yes, I mean, also this is in the shadow of the Black Lives Matter protests, whatever you want to call those things, also, and the semantic debates about that. This obviously was a different event, but it had some vague similarities, and there were debates about semantics back then also.
And there's been the sort of discourse over whether the way that the mob was treated is, evidence of white privilege, which I don't always think is the most useful framing.
Yeah, I actually have some thoughts on that. So let's save that for a little bit. Okay. So you're thinking insurrection. So in the while it was happening, I actually tweeted in a parody of Dave Wasserman, is that guy's name, who is the he sort of like as results come in on election night, he says, "I've seen enough." So and so wins.
Right.
So I said, "I've seen enough. It's a coup." But I think I'm moving slightly back from that, and it's somewhere between coup and insurrection. Obviously, no one who was actually involved with the state, as far as we know, was actively involved. So that seems more like an uprising or an insurrection. And then but of course there's this question of how the hell did these people pull this off, and what were the Capitol Police doing, and is this incompetence or something more sinister? Yeah. And I guess hopefully we can find that out, because it seems like it's just totally bizarre that these jokers managed to break in and cause all this havoc, and 5 people are dead and so forth. Yes, I guess that's
thoughts on that. Well, this question of how they were treated by the Capitol Police, I think that it's worth keeping in mind that, unlike, say, the Black Lives Matter protesters, these folks often were armed. And I think that the Capitol Police were trying to deal with them in a way as to avoid people starting to shoot.
Right. No, it's interesting that, as far as I know, no protesters shot at the cops or anyone else.
Right.
And it seems like, and so, I mean, as far as I could tell, very few people actually had firearms on them when they went into the Capitol. Some people, I mean, they smashed the windows with, like, metal poles and stuff, and there were people who had, like, axes and knives, and of course the cosplay people who have the full, like, tactical gear on. But there wasn't, the only shot seems to have been the plainclothes officer shooting the woman who was coming through the broken window. So there's that. So it wasn't like an armed uprising, and it wasn't, and so, I mean, maybe you could have imagined the police, like, firing in the air or something and trying to disperse people, and maybe who knows what the reaction to that would have been. But that didn't happen. But certainly they were outmanned, and there were surging people, like, coming in, and I guess the people on the ground decided, kind of like, it'll be better for everyone if we let them through instead of trying to repulse them outside. So that's crazy that happened. But yeah, they didn't shoot their way in. And there's also this bizarre, this is a ragtag bunch who pulled this off. And you had the people in the tactical gear, and you had photos of men who had zip ties, as though they were ready to
kidnap
or detain people, who knows, presumably members of Congress. And it seemed like, sort of either they were paramilitary types or they were pretending to be. And then you had, like, grandmothers and very confused looking people. Actually, I want to, I'm pulling a, pulling a Bob right here, where I have something loaded up on my phone that I want to play. Because I think this is going to be in a, like, the DBQ, document-based question on an AP exam 20 years from now. Did you see Elizabeth from Knoxville? Did you see this clip?
Yes, I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Okay. And so I'm going to, hopefully this will come through. I think you need to see it also, so I'm going to hold it up to the camera. Our podcast listeners will not be able to see it, but if they Google or whatever, Elizabeth from Knoxville, they'll probably see it. And so hopefully this works. Let me turn the volume up as much as I can. Okay.
What happened to you?
I got maced.
You got maced? And what happened? You were trying to go inside the Capitol?
I made like a foot inside, and they pushed me out, and they maced me.
What's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Elizabeth. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee.
And why did you want to go in?
We're storming the Capitol. It's a revolution.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Okay, so this is seems like a very normal person, kind of. A very, like, average person. Yeah. It's obviously, like, a woman who's, about 25 or 30 years old. A very confused person. Someone who was doing something that she maybe didn't really think about, and then was shocked that she was injured. What can you say about this woman? She was somehow misled monstrously by things she read online, presumably.
Yeah, but
how did this woman, who is probably just has some average job and is an average person, come to be storming the Capitol and think that she was taking part in a revolution and that it would all go fine. Like, she is shocked that she got maced.
Yeah.
What did you think
really
of that? I thought it
like,
was remarkable.
It's like the dog catching the car, right? What does the dog actually do once it does catch the car?
Yeah. And actually, sorry, go ahead. I'll follow up in a minute.
Okay. I was going to say, it does seem like at least those who were the most radicalized, because I don't know that, I think it's pretty obvious there wasn't a centralized plan as in what we're going to do once we enter the Capitol building. I don't think that existed.
Right.
Obviously, it was organized as far as Trump called for a rally and they all showed up. And at a certain point, it's like, if you are claiming that the election is being stolen and that's actually happening, if that were truly happening, then the logical next step would perhaps be to try and, take matters into your own hands and make sure that democracy actually pulls through. So it's sort of, no one had to say storm the Capitol, but the stakes were made high enough to where it kind of became the logical next step if you were adhering to that. And I really think a lot of the most rabid people are fully locked into the QAnon stuff, where they not only think that democracy is at stake, they think that bringing down the kind of sinister human trafficking cabal, I think that they literally think that there are children who will be freed from their sex dungeons if they go in. And so I think, because at least like the woman who ended up being fatally shot by police, her Twitter feed is all the QAnon, where we go one, we go all. Yeah.
So that's a strange postmodern conspiracy theory that is totally detached from reality. And so, I'll just read two tweets that were I found appropriate. One is from Kept Simple, with this guy named Mark, and he says, sort of stunning that even in the midst of a job-killing pandemic and widespread public debate about stimulus funding, the rioters didn't have a single material demand. So this woman seemed to think that once they breached the Capitol, once they entered the Capitol, something would happen that would be good, unclear what, but certainly nothing bad would happen. And just like being there, I don't know, it's almost like waiting for the Hale-Bopp comet to come down and like rescue us. And then someone whose handle is HEABERALD tweeted, "I can't stop thinking about how funny it is to storm the Capitol building just to walk around and sit in various chairs." So mostly when these guys, this is a ragtag bunch, as I said, a motley crew, and so some of them were these tactical people who had like a plan, and some of them were just like kind of tourists, and they're just like looking at things, and some of them were like, let's grab some stuff, and some of them were like, let's sit in Nancy Pelosi's chair and take a photo. There were like dozens or hundreds of live streamers. There was Baked Alaska, this alt-right sort of personality who I thought had faded away. He was there live streaming. Nick Fuentes, another alt-right personality, was there. It was sort of a social media postmodern event where people, what did they want? They wanted selfies. I'm sure like they could have looted, they could have smashed the thing to the ground and stolen all the paintings and the Declaration of Independence, wherever the hell they keep that. But they were taking selfies. It was like this sort of like, we're just like, this is just a fun time. So it was a mix of like people who were totally like living in an alternate reality. The term I've seen, I don't know who coined it, is dream politique instead of like realpolitik. Dream politique is like nothing matters. Like reality is malleable and something like great things are on the horizon. Just this total crazy nonsense that has become part of the stew of American life under Trump, but then also mixed with, people who seem to have some sort of plot that they thought they were going to be able to pull off with the zip ties and so forth, and also the people who seem seriously mentally ill, like Mr. Q Shaman or whatever, who is like summoning the spirits of something or other in his cloak. And I also wanted to bring up all the one of the themes I've been talking about under Trump is how American life has become cosplay, and people dressing up and sort of enacting various roles, either as, they are like the Blue Lives Matter supporter or something, and so they're basically an honorary police officer, and they're gonna like bring justice to the streets or something, or they are like some sort of just like playing out morality drama in their own lives and dressing up as something. And so hundreds of people were wearing wacky costumes. And like what were they thinking? What these people who were like, were wearing a wacky hat and were busting into the Capitol. I just don't understand it.
It's very much a postmodern politics of symbols, not of legislation. And so the point would be to have images, right? Like, well, you've gone in, you have occupied these places that are symbolically meaningful. You've had the pictures taken. That's all you really need to do. Once you've done that, once you've had the pictures taken, time to head out, right? Because if the politics is solely of, these sort of memes and symbols, which is in many ways Trump's politics, then what are you going to do? Like go steal documents from a senator? I just don't think that's something they're interested in. They could have, stolen, I don't know, hard drives or.
It seemed like a little of that happened, but
stolen, but
mostly not. I mean, some of the people were posing for photos with the Capitol Hill police officers, and so it was kind of a happening in like the 60 Cents. It was like a pseudo event. In the whoever Daniel Borstein, whatever sociologist from 50 years ago coined that term, where it's like something is happening here, but really nothing is actually happening. It was a quasi-insurrection coup, like a incitement to riot. I hope and pray. I don't really pray, but I hope that hundreds of people get arrested and prosecuted for this absurdity, and I hope that a lot of people resign who fucked up so much that let these jokers come in here. I don't know. It's just so strange and stupid, and so it really is like an appropriate, denouement to the end to like the Trump years, which have been like just really, really strange and really, really stupid, and just nonsense, like from beginning to end, and getting, Matt Christman said on Inauguration Day, this is the stupidest day in American history, and every subsequent day that will be true. And like it kind of is true. Like it's just gotten stupider and stupider and worse and worse. And I don't know. I hope for the return to normalcy that I've been saying Biden will bring us. But who knows? Are these people going to return to their lives? Is Elizabeth Knoxville going to go back to being like an accountant at some small firm in Knoxville, or is she gonna? I have no idea.
Well, it's hard to know what happens once Trump is no longer there, if indeed that's going to be the case. I mean, does Trump just go right to running for 2024 and kind of, having some deal with OAN or whatever, and so they can have this sort of shadow government to be loyal to, support primary challenges in 2022. I don't know. I think
he kind of wanted that, and he fucked himself with the events of the past 3 days. I think that was the glide path was him starting or taking over a TV network and having his own TV show and returning to being like sort of a media personality, and endorsing people and being kind of a kingmaker, even though it was unclear how much power he actually had in his dotage, and his supporters, his craziest, most deluded supporters, fuck that, I think. And so it does seem like he will. I think he probably will be impeached a second time, which is funny and appropriate. And there's probably I didn't even realize you can do a Senate impeachment trial after someone has left office. Apparently, there's historical precedent for that, and that would like deny him his pension and other such benefits and stuff like that, and ensure that he couldn't run again for public office.
Yeah, the Senate can bar him from running for federal office. Yeah. So I wonder, I mean, you would think cynically from a Republican senator's point of view, it would be in your interest to borrow for money again.
Yeah.
So, if anything, if you yourself, I mean, because let's face it, if Trump runs again, surely he's the front runner. I mean, surely no one, who could beat him in the Republican primary?
Yeah, I think I would have said that a week ago, honestly. But the double losses in Georgia, suddenly a blue state, and the events of the past 72 hours, I think, have really lowered Trump's stock. And there were probably, I feel like there's a solid 10% of the American voting public who are regretting their votes for Donald J. Trump in November and are sick of his bullshit. And he's not going to get any better 4 years from now. He's going to be older and more deranged, and we're not going to remember the past 4 years fondly. Insurrection, economic collapse, mass plague, death, and constant craziness.
I hear you, but still, the party opposed his candidacy in 2016, but it didn't matter because the voters in the primary supported him. And I think now the party establishment really, really dislikes him. But I don't know that he has lost a plurality of the voters, at least enough to get him. But, that's to say if he does indeed run. I don't know that.
Yeah, there were so many. I mean, obviously he won pretty handily in the primary in 2016, but there were numerous chances where if people had been known what was coming, taken him seriously as an electoral threat, and united. I mean, it was a divided field. Everyone thought they could get advantage by kissing up to him. All the other candidates, kissing up to him because, of course, he would implode eventually, or he would just drop out because this is all a joke. And so, now we know. Knowing is half the battle. And, now we know who he really is and the threat that he represents. I don't think he actually, this is my own thing, I don't think he really ever wanted to be president. He ran for president because he was bored and he wanted attention and he wanted to sell hats. He wanted a fluke. He was not happy to actually win. And I don't think he would actually, absent the crazy events of the past week, I don't think he would have run again. He would have teased it. He wants to be on TV. He wants to play golf. He wants people to flatter him. That's about it. He's an old man. He doesn't actually care about politics or policy. He likes power, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I could see him thinking well, no, I'm not going to try to run again because I really should be the president. And that would be well, I guess he did concede, supposedly.
Yeah, he went about 95% of the way there to saying, this is over. And he's not going to, no one wants to help him rehabilitate his image. There's not going to be an Oprah interview where he talks about his secret alcoholism or something, and he's better now. The mainstream powers are totally against him now, and I think probably the GOP would be happy if he dropped dead tomorrow, and the GOP meaning the GOP establishment, and they didn't have to deal with him anymore. And yeah, I think he goes to Mar-a-Lago and fights extradition. I've been joking about this, but fights extradition to New York State, where he will be indicted by the Attorney General there for various pre-2015 offenses involving insurance fraud, tax fraud, etc. Let's return to the white supremacy thing. So one of the an early thing you saw people saying about this, on Twitter and elsewhere, was, this was a white supremacist rally essentially, and there were people, there were people with Confederate flags. Someone with a Confederate flag was walking through the halls of Congress, something that didn't happen during the Civil War, of course. There were people wearing, Holocaust denial or Holocaust celebration shirts. And someone posted this funny joke that's do the neo-Nazis want to deny the Holocaust happened or say it didn't go far enough? They sort of bounce back and forth. So there were some very bad people here, nasty types, and but was it actually? And so the early characterization was like the cops let them in because they're white. They got away with this because they're white. If they were black, they would have been shot shot down, and they would have been spraying bullets into the crowd. And I think there's some amount of truth to that, but I think this was more about the crazy unreality of the Trump era, and what these people I'm sure there were like Klan sympathizers in the crowd and neo-Nazis and so forth, but I think there was probably more people like Elizabeth from Knoxville who thought something great was going to happen, and just trying to view this as like a Charlottesville 2.0, I think doesn't make as much sense, because Charlottesville they had like 300 young men causing mayhem and marching with torches. This was there were grandmas here. The people who were rushing in and causing mayhem were mostly bearded men in their 20s and 30s, but it ran the gamut. And Elizabeth from Knoxville was there, and hundreds more like her, thousands more, who were just swept up in this total delusion that something great was going to happen when they did this. And I think viewing this through the racial lens is a mistake, because it polarizes people when we should be saying these crazy Trump supporters invaded the Capitol and tried to overturn democracy. That's a message that unites 90% of the country against them. When you get into, and Kamala Harris was saying this, when you get into saying like we need to think about white supremacy and all that jazz, no pun intended, from that people were talking about this summer, I think that is a bad way to frame it. So I've talked for a lot. So what do you think of this?
I agree that it's not the most useful way to frame it. I do think there's truth to the thing is, you wouldn't. Okay, there's the counterfactual question of, if you had several hundred black people or majority black mob, many of them armed, how would they have been treated? The thing is that wouldn't happen. They would not arm themselves in that way, but they wouldn't, because they would know that how dangerous the image of an armed black person storming the Capitol would be. And also, civil rights protesters just have more experience protesting. I think that's something that hasn't been talked about enough, is that these people are not experienced protesters, right?
Right.
And so
they probably went to Trump rallies before.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a carnival atmosphere.
Yeah, and so they didn't know how to behave themselves or how to interact with the cops or anything like that. I do think that many of them felt emboldened to be able to storm the Capitol with impunity, in part because of this sort of assumption of, they don't need to worry about being punished or about the cops shooting them. And I think part of that comes from white privilege, so I do think that is there, but I don't know that that's the first thing that we should talk about necessarily, and certainly not the last thing we should talk about.
Yeah, I think we should say, not these were white supremacists and this proves that the system is inherently racist. True or not, I don't think that's what we should be saying. We're saying these are Trump's hardcore supporters. These are the people, Trump spoke to them, and whether he literally incited them or not, they believed they were fulfilling his wishes to go and storm the Capitol. And this is bad. And American society needs to reject this, or we're going down an even darker path. So I think that's sort of, honestly, that's what's true and a winning message.
I honestly think anti-Semitism has more to do with the worldview than white supremacy. This QAnon stuff really is drawing heavily from, the blood libel.
Yes.
When you're talking about conspiracy theories about a mysterious cabal that is enslaving children, and usually
feasting on the blood.
Feasting on their blood, right? The adrenochrome, right? This is just... So
just for people who aren't paying attention to this, the theory essentially is that there's a secretive, pedophilic, cannibalistic cabal that has been, running the government for years, that Hillary Clinton and John Podesta are involved with, and they harvest a, pheromone or chemical from children that they ingest to give them some sort of special powers, and that's where the killing and the cannibalism and the pedophilia comes in. So this is totally removed from reality and insanity, but this is kind of the core QAnon belief. And so that's when we're saying that the children would be freed or something. If the children were being held in the sub-basement of the Capitol, maybe that's what they thought, or who knows what.
Or under the New York subway or something like that. Isn't that part of?
There's all these things where they think children are being held underground,
Yeah.
and the mole children was what they were being called at one point by at least some people. And it's just, this is what it's just this, it's not even, it's untethered from any aspect of reality, let alone politics.
Yeah, it's non-falsifiable. Any evidence to the contrary is actually evidence for the conspiracy because it's been planted by the conspiracy. Kind of like the Christian fundamentalist thing of, some fossil that's more than 6,000 years old. Well, that's proof because that's, something that has been planted by the devil to trick us. And why would he go through that trouble unless it were true, right? So it's,
And so I think I've said this on the show before, but
religious almost. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one of the very early things was whoever was posting as Q said on this date Hillary Clinton will be arrested and brought to Guantanamo and tried, and then of course that didn't happen, and people were like, well, what's like she's still walking around? I thought you said she was arrested, and they said, oh, that's the clone. The clone is walking around. The real Hillary was taken to Gitmo, and this is the clone. So very early on, it just escaped from anything related to reality, and it's like gone even crazier from there.
And I think, storming the Capitol on the day of the Electoral College's votes being certified by the Senate is a way of trying to deal with that cognitive dissonance of really believing in this prophecy that then doesn't come true. I mean, it's kind of like, the Millerites in the 1840s who are told, oh, on this day in March 1844, Jesus is going to come back, and they're sitting on top of the hill. Jesus doesn't come back, and then William Miller goes back to his Bible and says, oh, I miscalculated. It's going to be October 1844. And then that day goes and passes by, and he's like, oh, well, on that day, that's when Jesus started reading the names from the Book of Life. And once that's done, but there's a lot of names in the Book of Life. So, and that movement has morphed into Seventh-day Adventism and Jehovah's Witnesses. So that failed prophecy certainly didn't prevent people from, so it just morphs. So the QAnon stuff is going to morph into other stuff, just like it morphed from, the satanic panic of the 1980s and even the kind of, Pizzagate stuff. And
Pizzagate is the direct, predecessor to QAnon.
So I don't know what it's going to morph into next, because that's almost, I don't know. I mean, someone pointed, there's a really good YouTube, his channel is called Folding Ideas, but he has this kind of hour-long video on YouTube about flat eartherism and points out that flat eartherism has really seen a decrease in public interest and traffic and these, there's a rash of stories like 2 years ago about how big flat earth stuff was, and people were falling down YouTube rabbit holes to believing about the flat earth stuff. And really in about 2 or 3 years, that's kind of sapped away, and YouTube sort of tinkered its algorithms. And if you look up flat earth stuff, you're way likelier to find videos debunking flat earth stuff. Mm-hmm. But there's this, as he talks about in the video, all those flat earth people just ended up going over to QAnon.
It's
not like it went away. It's just it morphed into this, and so who knows what they're going to do.
And I think there was a really good article in the New Yorker about 2 years ago about the flat Earth stuff, which we'll find the link and include it below. And I think one of the points it made was that the flat Earth does connect to like anti-Semitism, because you think like, well, who benefits from the flat Earth? And then the answer is, it's the Jewish cabal that controls the banks and the media. They're the ones who want to keep us ignorant of the truth about the flat Earth. So yes, that the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is sort of the base text for a lot of this craziness. Let's see. Do you have any predictions about what, maybe we'll be made fools of, because this is not going to post for at least 24 hours, and something insane will happen tomorrow, I'm sure of it. You can't have a normal day as long as Donald Trump is president. Do you have any predictions about what's going to happen over the next 2 weeks?
2 weeks? Oh, man, I don't know. As far as will Trump, I agree Trump will be impeached. I don't know if he's going to be actually convicted. Obviously, I don't know, but I'm not even going to predict. I will make a general 2021 prediction, which is that I think the year will be disappointingly for some better than the last. I think, because the jokes are already out there, but like, oh, 2021 is just going to be more like 2020. And my prediction is that when Biden gets in, that he will quickly ramp up and sort of reorganize the vaccine rollout. And, by fall 2021, children won't be wearing masks to schools, and people will be going to see Dune in theaters, even though it's streaming on HBO Max. And
I mean, you got to see that on the big screen. You're cheating yourself
exactly.
if you're just seeing that at home.
I'm not saying it's going to, everything's going to be rosy, but yeah,
so
I don't know.
You see a return to normalcy as much as we can from the craziness.
Yeah, I mean, a shitty normal, but normal. Yeah. I wrote a thing in the Week along these lines, and I pointed out, in the American Civil War, about 1 out of 10 young men in America died, and then within a generation, the United States was the world's largest economy and had colonies in the Caribbean and the Pacific. World War II, 400,000 Americans died, which is probably what the COVID death count is going to end up being. And within a decade, we had TV dinners and two car garages. I think America can absorb the Trump presidency and the pandemic. I don't know that's necessarily a good thing that we can absorb that and just sort of carry on, muddle through. But I do think that will happen. But yeah, as far as what the next chapter of the Trump farce will be, it won't be on Twitter, apparently.
Okay, perfect segue. Well, let me just give my prediction. You're a historian, so you have some responsibility, whereas I'm just a crazy podcasting person, and so I can shoot off in any direction, and there'll never be any consequences for me. And so I've been saying, for a long time that I thought it was likely that Trump would resign and have Pence pardon him. And I would have said that, a week ago, that would be an endgame that made sense, because the self-pardon is too risky. And so that made sense to me, and obviously it hasn't happened yet. Trump screwed over Mike Pence, the most loyal person, who has been more loyal to, maybe Don Jr. has been more loyal to Trump. But Pence kissed his ass and never said anything bad about him, no matter what. And Trump endangered his life. Those people wanted to assault Mike Pence and force him to do something that he didn't want to do. And so Mike Pence is now maybe less likely to want to give Trump a full and unconditional pardon for any crimes he's ever committed. And so, but thinking about it, now that impeachment seems to be likely, impeachment and conviction would mean he can't run again. He loses whatever immunities or whatever. He can't have, a pension from the government, etc. And so that would be bad for Trump. And if Trump just resigns in exchange for a Pence pardon, then Pence gets back in the good graces of the Trumpist part of the GOP. He gets to be president for a couple days. He's in the history books. As I saw a really good tweet saying, if Trump resigns and Pence is president, he gets to be on the novelty rulers. His face is on the novelty rulers. He will be the 46th president for some length of time, and so he's in the history books forever. That's great for him. And and then he would be the front runner in 2024, and that's a way to get Trump out of here. So I think that could happen. Maybe the impeachment will happen quicker. Trump lives in a world of delusion and unreality also, but he does have very good survival instincts, and he's made it this far unindicted and without ever being punched in the face by anyone or whatever. And he he manages to slip slide out of a lot of shit. So him resigning in exchange for a total pardon from Pence still does make sense to me right now. But it's crazy. But crazier things have happened in the past week in American politics.
I think. I'll say, if I could imagine a 2/3 majority in the Senate to convict him, if that happened, it would be because Republican senators were personally outraged by the physical threat posed to them in the Capitol, right?
Yeah, I mean, just look at the revulsion.
And also, I really think that the loss in Georgia, the 2 Senate races, that they should have won. I think that's also really sour.
Yeah, it goes both ways, because it's like they both, the GOP both needs the Trump hardcore believers, and the Trump hardcore believers repel the great American middle. So it's hard to know which way it really goes. So Trump wasn't on the ballot, on Tuesday, and the GOP lost both races. Maybe if Trump had been on the ballot in some way, they would have done a little bit better. Who knows? But yeah, their physical safety, they all went through some sort of traumatic event on Tuesday, possibly thinking they were about to be murdered. That shakes the conscience. And look at how how basically everyone is like turning on poor little Josh Hawley right now. And he lost his book contract. That's very sad. And his political mentor, Danforth out of Missouri, said it was the worst mistake of his life that he supported his ascent. And there's this photo of him raising a fist and looking like quite a fool with his hair up and his slim cut suit. So this guy's career is over, I hope. And he was he led this charge, and maybe he'll even get expelled. I mean, if they could if the Senate could get rid of Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley and have them be replaced by replacement level GOP, nobodies who would just vote the party line, I think they would take that chance, because they hate those, themselves hate those people. So that would get rid of some of the craziness, and they're off in the wilderness and whatever. So yeah, there's tons of unpredictability. Trump does not always act rationally. Who the fuck knows what's going to happen? But
I guess, does this mean Trump isn't going to be able to get a memoir published? I didn't think about that.
Well,
like, what publisher is going to, well, didn't he already get a book deal? I'm trying to remember now.
He does not have a book deal currently. I'm sure of it. It would have, I mean, I think he'd rather do a TV show.
But I mean, a book would make him so much money. I mean, he needs to get money somehow, right?
One would think. I mean, it seems like he already started this PAC or super PAC or something where money was flowing to him from the MAGA faithful, and it was unclear what he was doing with it, and the money could be, used for like office space or maintaining the grounds. And what if Mar-a-Lago is a place where he both lives and works? Et cetera, et cetera. So the scam can continue through fleecing all the Elizabeths from Knoxville who are like one level craziness below, who just want to send money to, our dear former president who was so poorly treated. They treat me very unfairly. I've been joking for a while that's Trump's epitaph and I'll be on his gravestone. Because that is his core. That's like the core. They treated me very unfairly. And, true in some respects, but did Twitter treat him very unfairly, or did Twitter, treat him like an angry toddler and that they were trying to pacify? And for many years, okay, so Donald J. Trump, our president, has been banned from Twitter, and he's trying to jump to like the @POTUS @White House and other such accounts, and those are being banned. Team Trump as we speak. So this is funny, and a lot of other MAGA types are going down. They took down Ben Garrison, who is who's like the most popular MAGA cartoonist in the land, and does these strange drawings that are captivating and hard to decipher.
Corny.
And yeah, a lot of this is like the night of the long knives in MAGA world on Twitter. So what do you think about all this nonsense?
It's first, I'm definitely not, because one of these people who's like, oh, but what does this mean for But I don't care about the slippery slope stuff. I guess is what I'm saying.
And I do not think cancel culture has reared its ugly head once again. Trump is a sui generis figure, and this is different.
Yeah, if you don't want to get permanently banned by Twitter, then don't try to incite an insurrection in our nation's Capitol building.
Yeah.
If you're not doing that, I think you're going to be fine. Don't post like crazy anti-Semitic memes. I guess it's something else that might get you perma-banned. Twitter's a private company. I have the kind of boring take on that. They can do what they want. I mean, as a historian, I had the thought of like, oh, what happens to all the tweets?
They're archived in various places.
Sure, but I mean, does that website is like TrumpTweets.com? Is that website still going to exist in 50 years? I mean,
right. Someone should print all these things out and put them, in bound volumes in the Rare Books archive.
Yes. I mean, digital archiving is such a crazy. I know this may not be what you're most interested in, but
digital archiving.
If you look at an academic article or a book written in like 2005, like half the URLs in the footnotes are dead now.
Right.
I've even thought about like Netflix. Is Netflix going to exist in 100 years? And if not, all the movies and TV shows they put out, they're not on DVDs. It's just on Netflix. Anyway, so I had the thought of what happens to all the tweets. Are future historians going to have to I tweeted this. Are they going to have to like infer what Trump tweeted from what like Rob Reiner tweeted, or what like, I don't know, when the
the Plato's Cave allegory, the cave version of Trump historiography.
And because it reminds me of how we don't have like most of the writings from the ancient Gnostics, but we have sometimes they were quoted by Orthodox Christian theologians who were arguing against them, and so we're able to get fragments of Valentinus from Irenaeus or Clement of Alexandria. So this is my imagination of someone piecing together what Trump said.
Yeah. So historians 1,000 years now will be like, this figure of Trump, he was very interested in Graydon Carter. We don't know who Graydon Carter was. And we don't know. We know he had bad food restaurants. And we knew that he had a big problem. And that problem was that his VF Oscar party is no longer hot. So I'm quoting my favorite of the Trump tweets. So one of the interesting things about Trump is he never deleted his old embarrassing tweets. And people would continue to retweet the stuff with the ones where he's talking about Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart. What is that her name? Kristen Stewart? And about how he hates Diet Coke, but he'll keep on drinking that garbage, and like all this classic crazy shit he did before he entered politics. Like it just stayed on there. Now it's all vanished, but there's still the screenshots, and it's archived in various places. So hopefully, I think that will continue to exist. I mean, was anyone archiving Team Trump? Was anyone archiving Ben Garrison and these other strange figures? Probably that's less likely. So who knows?
Yeah. I mean, it's just interesting for all those tweets to be gone. In that really was his main way of communicating. It would be like FDR's like radio, like
the fireside chats,
like just being gone. Now, yeah, granted. Hopefully they will, I say hopefully, archived in some way. But it does seem like harder to imagine him mounting another presidential campaign or really trying to maintain some sort of public presence or kind of have his own kind of para-presidency without Twitter, without
and
Facebook.
He's been Facebook and Instagram indefinitely suspended him also. And so that's a good point that really hurts his prospects of keeping his hand in the game over the next 4 years. I didn't think he wanted to run again anyway, but it does make it somewhat harder. And I mean, I had a joke like, if only there were some way for the president to release short statements to the press. All this happened before Twitter existed in some way, and it's just like it's like Trump made Twitter an important thing. In a way it wasn't before. It was mostly like bullshit and jokiness before Trump, showed his power. And like he it's not like he Trump was not like the guy who runs the Steakums account or something. Like he wasn't like participating in memes. He just he would say strange things and then the media would amplify it. So it was his way, but he can if he wants to set up a blog using Squarespace or something, he can do that. And if the media finds that what he says is noteworthy, like they can report it. And so basically Donald Trump start a blog. Maybe Substack isn't going to take it at this point. Although if Glenn Greenwald, influential Substacker, and civil libertarian, maybe he'll make the case internally that Trump should get a Substack. And, I would say he would charge more than $5 a month because he's a former president. And so I would say $15 or $20 a month. And that's probably a way he could.
Yeah, Substack. That's the answer, I think. Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm just trying to think of a Trump post-presidency. Like, how there'll be the photograph of all the former presidents together in the Oval Office, whenever there's a new president. Like, Trump's not going to do any of that stuff, right? He's not going to go to Jimmy Carter's funeral, right? He's not going to
He didn't go to George H.W. Bush's funeral, and he was in office when that happened.
No. He's not going to do the sweet thing of like, oh, these two presidents for different parties, but now they're friends and they like laugh at each other's goofy socks and, they like do some, minute promo thing for some,
promoting vaccination or some other universally lauded worthy cause, the March of Dimes.
Yeah. He's not going to do any of that. So, yeah, the Trump post-presidency will be, he will be breaking precedent yet again.
Yeah, I mean, the expected thing, like I said previously, was that he would start his own cable news network or online TV show or something, because he's really more a media figure than a political figure to begin with. This week has made that somewhat harder, but so maybe he can't take over, OAN News at this point, but he could still take over The Blaze or something, Breitbart TV. And yeah, I mean, he could. I assume he'll be calling in to Fox and to the friendly friends at Fox and Friends, as Colbert used to say, on Friday mornings like he did before he was president, and that will probably continue. But I do wonder if like this was the breaking the spell, Emperor has no clothes sort of moment, and like he's going to lose some amount of power once he's no longer president, and then it's like, oh, now like 85 to 90% of the population disapproves of what happened. The stat I saw from a quick poll was 8% approval of the storming of the Capitol, 88% disapproval. So that's pretty bad. That's like NAMBLA sort of, ratings. And so he shot himself in the foot with this bullshit. And but I mean, things happen quickly, and I'm sure Biden's going to make plenty of mistakes, and Trump will be there to offer a quip or something. I mean, I actually do think he probably will be prosecuted in New York State, and there's a good chance that he actually does go to prison. And I think that would be an appropriate end in the Al Capone, sort of they got him for his taxes sort of thing. And I mean, he's very energetic, but he is an old man. I think he's 74. And I think both his parents lived for, past 90 or something, but he's not always going to be with us.
Yeah. Well, didn't his dad have Alzheimer's towards the end?
Yes, and there was a reported story that
speculation
that the dad kept on going to the putting on the suit and going to the office every day, and they would give him blank papers to shuffle and sign. So you can imagine something like that happening. It's sort of like a Truman Show kind of thing you can imagine happening, where like Trump just get busy by his close associates and aides, seeming to be doing something, but really he's not doing much. You can imagine something like that also. So,
oh man,
I think we may have reached the end of our time. It's almost midnight here on the East Coast on Friday, January 8th, the day that will live in infamy, the day that Ben Garrison and Donald J. Trump were both kicked off Twitter. So, do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I'll No, it's been a wild ride. Well, we'll see what more is to come. I did not know. Oh, what was I going to say? I did not realize. Did you know that in the 1950s, some Puerto Rican nationalists stormed the Capitol
I
building
was vaguely
and
aware of
shot
that.
four congressmen?
Yes, I was vaguely aware that happened. And
But yeah, anyway.
yeah, the Puerto Rican nationalist movement is one that is kind of largely been forgotten. I was reading a book that's a history of Bellevue Hospital, and there was a guy who was the master bomb maker for the Puerto Rican nationalists, and he accidentally blew off all of his fingers, and so and blew up his apartment, and so he was arrested, and they took him to Bellevue because they thought it was insane, and somehow, despite not having any fingers, he escaped from a third floor, his room in the mental hospital part of Bellevue with some people were helping him from the outside, and he shimmied down ropes or something and fled, and eventually ended up in Cuba, and yeah, so there's all sorts of crazy shit that happened with Puerto Rican nationalism. This is in the 70s this happened, that has been forgotten. But yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, okay, here's the last question as you as the historian. What is there a historical parallel to this event in America or somewhere else? I mean, the British sacked Washington and burned the White House and the Capitol in the War of 1812.
That's Dolly Madison famously escaped with Washington's portrait.
Right.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, it does remind me of some things like in the 1870s when sort of the White League, kind of this sort of a Klan-like paramilitary group, stormed the Louisiana state capitol, because it was a Reconstruction Republican state government, I think even a black lieutenant governor. And they were able to hold it hostage for several days until the U.S. Army chased them out. I think it was the U.S. Army. So that strikes me as more similar, though. Yeah, it has a sort of postmodern tinge to it that doesn't really have a precedent. It's not everything has precedent, and history does not always repeat itself. New things can happen. So I don't know. I am shifting my attention once Biden will be president, and we can shift our attention to UFO news or whatever it is. We do not have to be talking about Trump all the time. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, and I've been saying that too, that I think a lot of the people who were really energized on both sides of this, both MAGA, QAnon, hashtag resistance, they're going to get back into the hobbies that they had, in 2014, and the temperature will be lowered and people will pay less attention to politics, and the New York Times and Washington Post, the traffic numbers are going to go down, and hopefully American life will get somewhat more boring for some length of time. I feel like we need sort of a resting time, and Sleepy Joe, is the person to do that. Of course, there's all sorts of problems that he needs to deal with, and I don't have a ton of confidence that he's going to be able to deal with them super well. But I guess we have to see. Okay, let's end it there. So Bill, thanks for doing this on short notice, so late at night, and so you're on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle?
William R. Black is my Twitter feed. So you
haven't been banned. As of this recording, you have not been banned. But they're really. I mean, I saw one person. This is just a regular person. Posted first they came for the trade unionist's poem, about the Holocaust, talking about some Trump being banned or whatever. So who knows? This could spiral out of control, and we'll all be banned from Twitter.
Next, they may come. I don't think they will, but yeah, don't count it out. Thank you.
So thanks, Bill, and thanks to all of our viewers and listeners, and we'll see you again next time.